Beneath the morning sunlight and the lingering traces of the storm, will Tu Tien and Jack uncover the quiet truth about the power of compassion and a newfound faith in episode 19? 7 days after the Yagi storm had passed, the mountain sky finally turned clear again. Sunlight poured down the hillsides, filtering through leaves still glistening with rain, illuminating every scar the storm had left behind. Across the villages, people began slowly rebuilding their lives. Amid that quiet rhythm, the farm where Tu Tien lived also began to come back to life. Compared to other areas that were heavily damaged, the farm had been luckier. Floodwaters had swept through, dragging sand and debris, but it wasn't buried in mud like the town center. Tien stood on the porch, gazing at the banana rows flattened to the ground and saplings broken at the stem. She exhaled slowly, then rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Every day she cleared small sections, gathered torn leaves, propped up the plants that could still be saved, and swept sand from the paths and front yard. Jack arrived early, bringing tools and supplies. When he saw her wringing out wet blankets on the back porch, he quickly stepped forward to help. "Careful, they're heavy when soaked." Tu Tien gave a small nod, then moved toward the outdoor stove, where she was boiling water. Not long after, they began clearing out the storage shed together and reassembling the bamboo fence by the stream that had been pushed askew by the current. Pointing toward the stone bank, Jack said, "We should raise the embankment. I'll ask the crew to bring in larger stones and a mixer. If we don't reinforce it, next year's rains will do the same damage." Tu Tien sat on the porch step, wiping sweat from her brow. "You've already thought it through, haven't you?" Jack smiled. "If I don't, who will? You're out here alone. It's not safe to leave it like this." As the afternoon light softened, they sat together on the stone bank. Before them, the clear stream flowed gently, the breeze carrying the familiar scent of the forest. Though some tools had been lost and a few belongings swept away, Tu Tien wasn't upset. She said softly, as if speaking to herself, "Losing a little is still lucky. Some families lost everything." Jack said nothing. After a moment, he opened a bottle of water and handed her half. She accepted it with a quiet smile. In that moment, no words were needed. In the days after the storm, the most precious thing wasn't what they had managed to keep. It was the spirit of rising together, rebuilding one roof, one kitchen corner at a time. And in that first peaceful evening after the chaos, beneath the sound of forest birds and the golden light of dusk, two people sat side by side, quietly piecing life back together. Through their hands, their quiet strength, and a tenderness not yet spoken aloud. The sun had risen higher in the sky, and the breeze began to dry the blankets hanging from the bamboo line that Jack had tied up earlier that morning. He stood by the makeshift clothesline, holding the rope so it wouldn't sag. From the kitchen, Tu Tien emerged, carrying a bowl of freshly cooked porridge. The scent of fried shallots drifted through the air, making Jack's stomach growl. "You haven't eaten since yesterday, have you?" she asked. Not with scolding, but with quiet concern. Jack scratched his head and gave a sheepish smile. "I meant to, but it was a rushed morning." She placed the bowl on the bamboo table. "Eat. Wherever you're headed can wait. If you don't eat, I'll be upset." Jack hadn't even picked up the bowl when his phone rang. He answered, nodding quickly as he listened. "Okay, I'll be right there." Ending the call, he looked at her apologetically. "The charity group in town is about to transport the supplies. If I don't go now, they won't reach the villages in time. Rain check on the porridge." Tu Tien was quiet for a few seconds before turning back into the kitchen. She returned with a small carton of milk and handed it to him. "If you won't eat, at least drink this. If you faint on the road, who's going to take care of you?" Jack accepted it, saying nothing, just gave her a grateful look and turned to go. His pickup merged into a stream of vehicles, trucks, motorbikes, farm tractors, converging from all directions. Relief groups from across the country gathered at the distribution center. Each person had a task. Some hauled crates of water, others carried boxes of instant noodles or checked inventory. Jack moved among them as if he'd always been part of the team. The road into the village was still treacherous, parts of it impassable by car. Supplies were split into smaller loads strapped to motorbikes. In some areas, volunteers had to push the bikes uphill. In others, they waded through knee-deep muddy water to test the path. Jack rolled up his pants and carried 2 boxes of noodles across a canal, his legs caked in mud but his pace steady. At one distribution point, villagers stood in a neat line. Some wore torn clothes, bare feet muddy and blistered. A child clung to a pouch of milk, nestled close to his mother. An elderly woman received a banchong and whispered with teary eyes, "At this age, I never expected kindness from strangers." Jack stood in the center of the yard, sweat soaking through his shirt. He looked around and exhaled softly. There were no engines revving in his mind, no construction plans to review. Only the sound of voices calling out, children giggling, and eyes glowing with joy over small gifts. And in that moment, he realized, sometimes, the most valuable things don't come from grand gestures or loud applause. They come from the quiet acts of care that ask for nothing in return. Done not because someone is watching, but because your heart won't let you do otherwise. In the afternoon, golden sunlight stretched across the mountain slopes, still bearing the marks of soft mud at the foot of the hill. Once a heavily flooded area, now stood an emergency relief hub for local residents. Jack, along with volunteers, commune police, local militia, village youth, and charity groups from across the country, had been working non-stop since morning. No one cared about titles or backgrounds. Everyone moved as one, fast, focused, and quietly determined. The roads leading into the village were still thick with mud. Supplies had to be divided and passed hand to hand across slippery ground. Where vehicles couldn't go, people carried loads on their backs. A young doctor paused to carry an elderly man with an injured leg. Behind him, a tiny schoolboy struggled to lift a bag of instant noodles. Jack saw it and felt a tug in his chest. He stepped forward, gently took the load, and said to the child, "Thank you. You're doing great." The deeper they ventured into the hardest hit areas, the more Jack felt the quiet strength that comes from shared purpose. Strangers who had never met passed boxes of water and medicine without question. People crossing slippery riverbanks turned back to offer a hand to the next person. An old man wearing worn-out rubber sandals gave a child one of the cookies from his own aid pack. No one asked for credit, no one kept score. Everyone was quietly making up for one another's pain in the only way they could. Jack joined a group of youth clearing a blocked canal path. When one child slipped, he quickly grabbed the kid's arm and steadied him, reassuring softly, "It's okay, just take it slow." The boy nodded, eyes red but trying his best to smile. Jack patted his shoulder, then went to fetch more rope to tie along the path for stability. As the aid distribution point began to crowd, villagers continued to line up in quiet order. Each person received their portion, then stayed to help the next. A young mother holding a newborn was gently ushered to the front. From a distance, Jack stood silently, watching, trying to imprint every moment into memory. In the golden light of late afternoon, Jack realized something. The most beautiful thing to emerge after the storm wasn't the boxes stacked high with supplies. It was how people treated one another, with honest eyes, with helping hands, with hearts that never hesitated. In the face of loss, no one was left to stand alone. Humanity was the one thing the flood could never wash away. The next morning, just as Jack returned to town after a long day of disaster relief, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Huang. "I'm waiting for you at Min Huang Cafe. I'd like to talk, just the two of us." Though exhausted, Jack still went. He never wanted to leave room for misunderstanding, and he didn't want to owe anyone anything, not even a proper refusal. Min Huang Cafe sat quietly on a peaceful street, softly decorated with fresh flowers. A small cake, 2 glasses of orange juice and delicate touches awaited on the table. Huang wore a black dress, her hair loose, her smile radiant as she saw him walk in. On the table was a heart-shaped cake with careful lettering. "Huang, Jack." She pulled out a chair, inviting him to sit, then offered him a bouquet of purple flowers. Jack accepted it and gave a respectful nod. He already understood what this meeting meant. Huang hesitated for a few seconds before speaking. "I know this might be bold, but I want to be honest. From the first time I met you, I've had feelings for you. I just hope, if you don't already have someone, maybe you'd give me a chance." Jack was quiet, meeting her gaze, his voice calm but firm. "Thank you for your honesty, I really appreciate it. But right now I'm focused on my work, and I'm not ready for anything romantic." Huang tried to hold her smile, though her eyes revealed a flicker of sadness. "So, there is someone else." Jack didn't deny it. Gently he stood, placed the bouquet back on the table, took out his wallet and paid for the drinks and cake. 2 million, no hesitation. Before leaving, he bowed slightly. I'm sorry for keeping you waiting. I wish you happiness and someone truly worthy of you. Huang watched him walk away, her heart sinking. She bit her lip, then pulled out her phone and messaged Hoai, her contact. Find out who that girl at the farm is. Later, Jack went home to visit his mother, who had been waiting for days. Hearing that her son had returned, she brought out a pot of hot tea to the porch and gently scolded, "Even if there's a storm, you could have called your mother." Jack smiled. "I was busy, Mum. You were worried?" She shared stories about friends trying to introduce their daughters to Jack and how he had turned them down because he already had feelings for Tu Tien. His mother was surprised but not upset. She asked more about Tu Tien, then smiled warmly. "All I want is for you to live truthfully with your heart. She's divorced, yes, but that means she needs someone by her side even more. If you love her, help her stand strong." Jack nodded, feeling lighter than he had in days. For him, his mother's support was the first step toward doing what he truly believed in, being there for someone who was starting again from nothing. That afternoon, Jack drove his mother up to the farm where Tu Tien had been living and slowly rebuilding her life after the storm. The road wound through hills, the sun finally breaking through after days of rain, casting a soft green glow on both sides of the mountains. Jack's mother sat quietly in the passenger seat, occasionally turning her head to gaze out the window, her eyes carrying the weight of distant memories. Tu Tien was tending the fire when she heard the sound of a car pulling into the yard. She stepped out, hands still smudged with ash, her hair undone, just as Jack and his mother approached. His mother smiled gently. "You've worked hard, haven't you? How have you been lately?" Tu Tien bowed politely and invited them inside. The small porch had a bamboo table already set, and the three of them sat together in the open air, surrounded by the tranquil hills. Jack rolled up his sleeves to help Tu Tien clean vegetables and prepare the fish. His mother, nimble and familiar with the rhythm of a countryside kitchen, busied herself with the seasonings. Tu Tien was surprised at how naturally she moved. That afternoon's lunch was simple but fragrant. Braised fish, caramelized pork, boiled papaya, and wild vegetable soup picked fresh from the garden. Smoke curled from the wood stove, and the aroma drifted out to the front yard. Jack's mother nodded in approval. "Now this is real food. You don't get this kind of soulful meal in the city." During the meal, she leaned over and whispered to Jack, "I'm thinking of buying some fish fingerlings for the pond, and maybe a gas stove to make cooking easier." But Tu Tien just smiled and shook her head. "I'm used to cooking with firewood, seeing the flames and hearing the pot whistle. It's oddly comforting." His mother looked at her affectionately, then pulled out some fruit and snacks from her bag and asked Tu Tien to share them with the elderly neighbors nearby. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Jack led the bike out to get ready for their ride back. Tu Tien stood by the gate to see them off, holding a bundle of ripe bananas. Jack's mother turned around and said warmly, "If there's anything you need, just say the word. If something's missing, I'll have someone bring it up." Tu Tien nodded gently, unable to find the words. On the way home, Jack's mother sat quietly for a while, then softly said, "She's kind and hard-working. I'm relieved to know you're beside someone like that." Jack glanced at her, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. To him, this visit wasn't just a casual introduction. It was a silent yet deeply meaningful acceptance from the most important person in his life. And beneath the soft glow of the late afternoon sun, amid the peaceful simplicity of the farm, Jack felt it clearer than ever. This was the place he wanted to come back to, and she was the person he wanted to walk beside.
Cung của một người phụ nữ bị phản bội, vô chẳng mang gì ngoài bộ quần áo cũ kỹ, trái tim vỡ nát. Bóng lưng cô nhỏ bé đơn độc giữa con đường làng quen thuộc, nhưng giờ đây lại xa lạ vô cùng. Cô không biết mình sẽ đi đâu, sẽ làm gì. Tất cả những gì cô từng có, từng gìn giữ suốt năm qua, giờ đây chẳng còn thuộc về cô nữa. Có lẽ điều đau đớn nhất không phải là bị đuổi khỏi nhà, mà nhận ra rằng mình chưa bao giờ thực sự được xem là một phần của nơi đó. Cô đã từng cố gắng, từng nhẫn nhịn, nhưng rốt cuộc Cô vẫn chỉ là người dân trong chính gia đình chồng mình. Và giờ cô rời đi với hai bàn tay trắng nhưng lòng đầy những vết thương không bao giờ lành. Tử Tiên rời khỏi ngôi nhà mà cô từng coi là tổ ấm trong nước mắt. Nỗi đau khôn nguôi bị người chồng mà cô từng yêu đẩy ra ngoài một cách tàn nhẫn.